My name's Dr Mashru. I'm a consultant psychiatrist. I'm the medical director of the ADHD Health Clinic. I'm joined today by Clare Kenny.
Hi, I'm Clare Kenny. I work with organisations from a leadership and culture perspective to create environments where people are able to thrive and perform at their best.
Thanks a lot for joining me today, Clare. We actually know each other in a slightly different capacity. You came to see me as a patient. You were referred by a colleague that we both know who's an ADHD coach.
Yes.
So I just wanted to basically, we're going to have a lot of people watching this video who are wondering whether they might have ADHD. Mm-hmm. What led you to come to see me for an assessment? What was going on for you?
Yeah, so there were a few things. I don't remember really struggling with my mental health as a child, but from the moment I entered the world of work, when I was about 20, I've always struggled with my mental health, really kind of high anxiety, and then experienced addiction. So I've been sober for about 8 years now, so really kind of struggled with alcohol. And but I just about held it all together. I had a lot of processes in place. I took antidepressants, I did therapy, and I sort of just about was able to keep everything together. Yeah. And it went up and down, but I was able to just about keep my head above water. And then in 2020, so leap day of 2020, I had a baby, my daughter Lizzie. And for the first 6 months, I actually found my mental health really improved. It was lockdown. It was just me and my husband and our dogs in the house. My daughter kind of had one priority, which was keep baby alive, and it was actually felt quite good. But then as she got a bit older, I started going back to work, the kind of rest of the world came in. I started to get incredibly overwhelmed. I felt so full of rage. I kind of explain just how frustrated I felt. I felt incredibly overwhelmed by the simplest of things. And it felt like my mental health was just, I didn't know. Every day I would get to the end of the day, I was so exhausted, I was so overwhelmed. It didn't even feel like anything really significant had happened in that day. And I thought, I cannot believe I have to get up and do this all again. My memory, I started to really, really worry about my memory. I thought I was losing my mind. I had early onset Alzheimer's. I've never had a good memory, but it got to a point that felt really, really, really concerning. And so I was like, I don't really know what's going on here, but I really hope this isn't just, this is what life is for a woman, late 30s, with a baby. So I'd started looking at stuff and reading about things, and I was looking at perimenopause and stuff like that. And it was Liz, who is someone who I've done work with, who is an ADHD coach.
ADHD coach. Liz actually works at our clinic.
Yeah, and she, I had read a lot of the stuff she was talking about. She was talking about late ADHD diagnosis in women and how it can show up differently in women. And I was really, really resonating with some of the stuff she was saying. And I actually was having a podcast conversation with her where I ended up just sort of really grilling her and saying, I feel like it might be something that I'm starting to think might be what's happening for me. I went to a very close friend of mine who has a lot of neurodivergent friends, and her boyfriend has ADHD, and I said to her, do you think perhaps it's something that might be, I might have ADHD? And she with a lot of care and compassion, gave me a really long list of reasons why she thought I did have ADHD. And I was like, oh, okay, well, perhaps it's something I'll look at. Liz then recommended you. And that was almost the last point where I went, right, it's worth pursuing this and investing my time and energy and money in this, was when you said, a lot of women who've been on antidepressants their whole lives and it's never really helped. It's like trying to treat something that it actually isn't. And I thought, yeah, that's what I feel like. I've been on antidepressants for 20 years and I've had doctors say, they're supposed to be more of a temporary thing. And I'm like, well, they're not helping. They're not actually making a difference.
Well, just on that note, actually, because a lot of people that are watching this are going to resonate with your story right now. What did the antidepressants make you feel like?
I feel like A lot of people say they take antidepressants and they feel different or a bit less connected. I just felt like they haven't really made me feel any different. They kind of have taken the edge off, but I also wonder whether they took the edge off because I was through the crisis point. You know, you go to a doctor and you're in crisis, then you get the pills, and then 6 weeks later you're like, oh, the pills are helping. You're like, or is it just
the situation
I've come
changed
out of the crisis point? And it's kind of hard to tell. I'm absolutely not disputing like the power and the use of antidepressants, but I do feel like 20 years of taking them. And then when I got my diagnosis, and we'll talk a bit more about this in a minute, I'm sure. But once I got my diagnosis and started taking ADHD medication, I was like immediately tapering off my antidepressants. I was like, this feels like it's doing the heavy lifting and this is actually not really necessary anymore. And what can I do to bring this down? Whereas before I would have never felt able to take that crutch away because I felt, I had so much stuff that I found it really, really hard to cope with. That
on that note of finding it hard to cope with, if you're comfortable to talk about this for a moment,
absolutely.
You mentioned about alcohol in the past. Can you tell me a bit more about that? What got you into using alcohol in that way?
I talk about this a lot in my work, and it's sort of talking about addiction and the crossing in terms of ADHD and addiction. For me, it was the only thing, and really in some ways still the only thing I can think of that is incredibly effective at just quieting the noise in my brain immediately. Just being able to say, I have so many things going on and so overwhelming and so many demands and overthinking, and to just have a glass of wine, it just meant it would just switch off. It was like almost the ability to just check out of being me for a while. And it also, I actually, since not drinking, I have realised that I'm not a massive people person, and I'm an introvert, and I get my energy from being an introvert. And I think that it really helped me mask the discomfort that I feel in social situations as well, and just being able to switch off and bring my brain down, and also fulfills a bit of that need for reckless, abandon as well. And it's not, giving up alcohol is like the best thing I've ever done in my entire life, but I've never really found anything that was, its long-term effects are so bad, but that immediate, dimmer switch on my thoughts, it was very effective at that in the moment. And I think that is something that it was really hard to say no to that when your mind is always going at really high speed and causing you distress. To be able to just have something that you can drink and block it out in the short term.
Look, thanks for being so open about that. I wanted to bring that up, particularly for people that are watching, because in this line of work, I see this a lot. Alcohol, it's a lot of self-medication going on. And then eventually it goes beyond self-medication and it becomes more of a habit as well. Alcohol's one factor. And then there are other factors like substances that increase your dopamine, because your dopamine levels are low. So cannabis, cocaine, etc.
Or even like chocolate and sweets and
anything that ups the reward pathway. Just to go through a little bit about the diagnostic process. So before we saw each other, there were some forms that you had to complete. And I'm going through this more for the benefit of people that might be watching when wondering what goes on in an assessment. So you had to complete some forms. One of them was asking about ADHD symptom frequency. One of them was asking about autistic traits, because we see an overlap here. And then one was asking about depression and anxiety symptoms, because you hardly ever see ADHD symptoms of just executive functioning. You often see the emotional component. And then there were 2 informant reports where other people were basically commenting on you, essentially. And I think that's where your friend, if I'm not mistaken, someone did one of your informant groups, because there's a lot of information there.
Yeah.
In terms of examples. And it's quite interesting, isn't it? Because then when you suddenly see those questions out on black and white, you're like, this is me. This is me. This is me. And obviously you were diagnosed, and we went down the route of medication. Do you want to just, if it's okay by you, tell everyone what medication you take?
So I take methylphenidate, and I've tried different medications, but this is the one that I've ended up on, and it's been a really, I think often taking the medication made me realise so many things that actually you just sort of take as standard. And almost, especially when it comes to emotional regulation, if I have a couple of days off the medication, the comparison, I didn't realise, and we might edit this out, we might not, I didn't realise how many times I say for fuck's sake in my brain when I'm not on medication versus when I am on medication, because everything is just I'm so affronted by everything. Everything is so frustrating. Everything is a right pain. It's really getting in the way. And when I'm on medication, I just am able to take things in much more of a calm manner. And then that means that it's not triggering your nervous system. You're not kind of responding and taking that energy knock on. So in terms of my emotional regulation, I really, really noticed that difference, and being able to manage my energy. And one of the things that I think was very, very significant for me, for anybody, but especially for me as someone who works for themselves, is I was really, really struggling with kind of getting that paralysis of could sit at my desk for, and I'm not exaggerating when I'd say for like a 2-week period, I could sit at my desk and not be able to do anything, just desperately trying to get stuff done, trying to motivate myself, trying to do these tasks and just not being able to do them. And then having one incredible day where I'd get 2 weeks worth of work done, but living in fear of like, will this day ever come? What if I'm sick that day? What if I can't do it? And actually then I'm a month behind, and like living in that fear is just so terrifying and exhausting. And now, yes, I'm a human being, and there are days I'm more productive than other days, but I know that every day
there's a level of consistency.
Yeah, there's a level of consistency. I know I can do stuff and I can move through my task list, and it's not like building up into this
and you feel
terrifying,
a bit more in control of
instead of just feeling totally beholden to something that felt outside of my control. And then almost as much as those days where you're getting stuff done is fantastic, you burn yourself out on those days because you're like, I only have this day because I know tomorrow I'm not going to be like this anymore. So I've got to keep going. So it's even on the days where you are feeling productive and you are able to focus, it's exhausting, and you're not treating yourself right in those days either. So just being able to have a bit more prediction of what tomorrow looks like and what the next day looks like, and saying, well, next week I'm going to book in this, this and this, and I can trust that I'll be able to do it. Whereas before I'd be like, I have no idea. And then as someone who brings their own revenue in, delivers their own stuff, has no one else to rely on, that's a really, really scary and very frustrating way to live your life.
When you, if you don't mind saying it on here, when you came for a diagnosis, how old were you?
So it was last year, it was last October, so 40.
Why has it taken you till the age of 40?
I would have never considered ADHD.
Right.
It was not something I think, and I know and I understand the sort of, well, there's lots of people self-diagnosing or watching stuff on the internet and coming up with these conclusions, and is that fair? And I was like, but I think that there is a boy I went to school with, and to me, he is just what ADHD was. He ran around the classroom, textbook ADHD. And for me, it's always that boy that's what ADHD is. So the idea that I would have ADHD would just never, ever occur to me. It would have seemed utterly ridiculous. And then even as I got older, I just wouldn't have had the awareness to even have considered or even have looked into it. So whilst I think it's important that we are conscious about the content out there and we don't just believe everything and allow kind of influencers to say certain things, I think hearing other people's stories, especially older, like later diagnosed women, was really important to me because it helped me consider something that I potentially may never have considered. I would have been like, it's postnatal depression. It's just my anxiety's got really bad. There are so many other things that I think I would have considered before I'd have got to that. So for me, it was hearing Liz's story, and then that led me to ask more questions and then to learn more and to read more about it and say, oh, okay, so I might not be running around the room, but my brain definitely is. And that, you know, that difference, or I'm fiddling with my fingers, or like when I'm in bed, my toes like conduct an orchestra all the time. And it's like actually being able to recognize that those things where before you'd have just gone, no, you know, I'm not that boy in my classroom in the 80s and the 90s, because that's a one very narrow view of the diagnosis versus how it shows up in lots of different people. So for me, having that content and being able to see it from other people's perspectives was really, really helpful to start me on the journey of considering it. And before then, it just I wouldn't have even thought about it.
In terms of the medication, do you feel that the biggest benefit has actually been the emotional regulation, even more than the attention and concentration?
I think both. I feel I'm really, really grateful to know that I can trust myself to be more consistent, and that's less scary. But the emotional regulation, I think, really helps me to be a better parent. And then I don't have the guilt of feeling like I'm snapping or getting frustrated. So it helps in terms of the knock-on, the ripple effect of getting frustrated by something and then it having that ripple effect of then you feel guilty and the energy it takes. So I think that they're both really important, and both in a way mean I can trust myself more. I can trust myself that I'm going to get that done. Well, maybe. But I can also trust myself that I'm not going to respond in a way that feels really disproportionate.
Yeah. You can rationalise a bit better.
Yeah.
Why do you think women are coming in later and later for diagnosis?
I think that there is a much bigger awareness now, and more people talking about it and kind of being role models and explaining the differences. I think also, you know, something that Liz explained to me and helped me understand, because even after I was diagnosed, I still was like, oh, maybe I've made it up. Like I was gaslighting myself.
Syndrome,
and I was like, well, how was I okay at school? You know, it's like, and her explaining some of that stuff and talking about that tipping point often where you've just spent so much of your life keeping it all together just about, and then something happens, perimenopause, you know, have a child where then it all sort of, the house of cards all collapses. And that just felt so, I can resonate so much with that. And the more you talk, I just got back. I've been traveling around Europe last week, and I was doing different talks on talking about my experience of ADHD and then talking about neuroinclusion in the workplace and what you can do to help build kind of cultures that feel more inclusive. And there was a woman in the audience who had ADHD, and I felt like I was like preaching. She was like, oh yes. And it's like, the more you share your story and someone else who is diagnosed resonates with you as well, you're like, yes, it just, and then things in the past year. So if I was diagnosed, it's kind of just over a year ago, things that I wouldn't have even considered were part of having ADHD. Suddenly you're like, oh, and then now that makes sense why that's that way. Or gosh, I hadn't even thought about that being a thing. Or like I watched a TED talk with a woman talking about the fact that subtitles are really helpful with people with ADHD for processing. And I just thought I was a bit deaf. Like I've had to have subtitles on everything my entire life. And then you're like, oh, that connects and that connects. It's like the more that you have your diagnosis and an understanding and awareness, the more you're able to understand how that all fits together, and how there are so many different things that perhaps you just thought were odd or strange, or you just didn't even really think about, because who have you got to compare to? It's your own brain and it's your own behaviours that actually do fit on that. And they're not necessarily things that have to be changed or fixed, but it's nice to understand them, and it's really nice to be able to give yourself more self-compassion, I think, in terms of maybe I don't think or process or do things the way that some other people might, and that's fine. It's leaning into that rather than trying to fight against it. And that's a process, but it's a good one to be. It's a good journey to be on.
You mentioned that you work in the ADHD space. Can you tell us a bit about your work? What do you do?
Yeah, so I work with big, my kind of main clients are big global organisations, big corporates. And I work in terms of creating a culture where people feel able to thrive. So that can be from, building psychological safety, how do leaders behave, how do leaders show up, and how do we create more inclusive environments, specifically from the lens of neuroinclusion. And that not just being how do you build awareness and understanding of people who are neurodivergent, but also we all think in different ways, right? And we all have different passions and different interests. We have different ways of processing information. We have different ways of feeding back, and organizations are usually haven't really evolved very much in the way that they communicate. And if you picture a meeting, for example, it's usually the loudest people, the people who are active thinkers, who are confident to speak, and you capture all of their thoughts and ideas. But then the other people who might need time to reflect, who perhaps are too nervous to speak out loud, perhaps they are neurodivergent and want to process things in a different way. All of that incredible insight, ideas, feedback is lost, and then you miss so much stuff. Big issues are missed. You don't spot upcoming problems. It really impacts your ability to kind of innovate, collaborate, stay ahead of your competition, because you might have done the work in recruitment in bringing diverse brains into the room if you have, but then you're actually not, in terms of your ways of working and your ways of communicating, you are not setting those people up for success, and you're not hearing them. So it's like, how do you tweak some of the ways in which you are communicating or asking other people to communicate, so that you're not missing out on all different types of thought, whether that's neurodivergent or whether it is just a different way to the way you think, and not making an assumption that people think in the same way that you think as a leader.
What do you think are a few of the strengths of an employee with ADHD? In the role I worked in before I was fully freelance, and she wasn't talking about ADHD, but she said, she was like, it's terrible to say, but I feel like I should only ever hire addicts, because they're incredible in terms of the way that they focus, and she's an addict too, so she, knowing that kind of experience, in terms of, I'm so committed, I'm so above and beyond, because when I care about something and I'm focused on something, I will be thinking in so many different ways about how I can drive that forward and how I can make it better. I'm never ever done with my growth journey and my learning journey, and it's always about how can we push this and make this better, make this stronger. Very, very creative, brilliant at creative problem solving. Tell me what's wrong and let's unpick it and work out how we can fix this. Yes, there are days where I will struggle I'll get overwhelmed and I'll feel like there's loads I need to do and I can't really know where to start. But then I also have days where I feel like I can get through a superhuman amount in terms of capacity. Especially if the pressure is on and the deadline is on.
Yeah, absolutely. And from me personally, I feel like it's lots of different skills and being able to kind of bring those together, and also understanding what I am good at and what I'm not so good at, and being able to be open and transparent about that, because we all whether you have ADHD, whether you're autistic, whether you're neurotypical, there are things you're good at and there are things that you're not so good at. And I've worked with leaders who, funnily enough, there was a time where I had 2 part-time jobs. So one was 3 days a week and one was 2 days a week, and I did them at the same time. And I worked with 2 very different leaders at the same time. And one of them I found to be very uninclusive. And I got a very strong vibe from him that I didn't think like him. I didn't kind of have the same values as him. So therefore I was wrong. Whereas the other leader I worked with, we had similar ways of thinking, but we had a really different skill set. And she was very vocal about the fact that she really appreciated that I had a different skill set, because I was doing stuff she hated doing, or I was doing stuff that she wasn't very good at doing. And it was really great that we could complement each other like that. And same me, same week. And I felt so different working with these 2 people. I felt I lacked confidence. I questioned everything I was doing. I felt frustrated. I felt disconnected, disengaged. And then in the other role, I felt so motivated. I felt really psychologically safe to come up with new ideas, to try things out, to push myself to grow, to say, oh, I don't know, I've made a mistake. It was actually a really good example of just in the same human being in the same week feeling very, very different because the way in which I was led and the way in which my differences or my skills were valued versus not valued. And I think that that's really important. We have an affinity bias, right? We see other people and we see people who have got similar skills to us, and we naturally think, well, then they're better because they're like me. But you don't need another you. You need someone who's really good at the stuff you hate. You need someone who's really good at the stuff that you always struggle with and is going to love doing that, so you can carry on doing the stuff you love.
In terms of, just a last question, this about inclusion in the workplace, what some examples of what good practice is then?
So if I think about the meeting example that I talked about, so this is something that I think is really simple that people can do, is how do you create an opportunity for people to provide feedback, to give back their thoughts in a way that isn't just any questions, okay, fine, let's move on. And there's a couple of ways to approach that. One is give people a written option.
Okay.
Is there a Slido? Is there a email back? Fill in this feedback. You've got 3 days, come back. I want to hear your ideas. That helps a lot of people who might be nervous to speak in the moment or can't or need time to process before they can feedback. But also I think asking different questions. So not just has anyone got any idea, has anyone got any thoughts, or what are your questions? Saying, what might I have missed here? If we were going to play devil's advocate, what's wrong here? If we take this to market, what might be the problem? What might go wrong? What might the customers criticize about this? Ask leading questions, because one of the best ways to build psychological safety, which then drives inclusion, is creating space for dissent. It's creating space for people to disagree with you. And if you normalize that, it's not just saying, oh, do you all agree? Great, fine. It's saying, I want to hear the opposite opinion. We might decide that actually it's strong enough and we're going to carry on. It's not about having an argument, but it's for the sake of us checking that this idea is watertight, we need to look at it from every angle. So inviting people to dissent, inviting people to look at it from a different perspective. And then I think, as a leader, being really vocal about appreciating differences. Apple's tagline is we're all different and that's our greatest strength. And it's yes. So lean into that. Enough of lip service, which a lot of big corporates will do, is the lip service of diversity, is saying, actually, we have got these different people in the room and we're not going to waste them. And we want to hear your perspective, because you might think differently from me and I might not quite get it. But that's why it's important I hear what you've got to say. Because if I'm in an echo chamber surrounded by people who tell me, yes, I'm right all the time, then I'm going to miss some really big issues or really big errors. So it's important to create that environment where people feel safe to be able to share and to be able to buck the status quo when needed.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for your time,
No
Claire.
problem.
That's been quite insightful. Any questions you have for me as a psychiatrist?
A question that I get a lot, and I don't feel qualified really to answer, is when people say, if I think I have ADHD or I think I have autism, like, what should my first step be? I know it's kind of reaching out to your GP, but when you've got kind of the limitations and stuff and long waiting lists, what are some of the things you think people can do first?
I think knowledge is really important, right? Start to understand the conditions. I do think you should go and see a bona fide professional. As consultant psychiatrists, we generally have good working experience of lots of conditions, not only ADHD or ASD, but other conditions as well. And I think it's an important skill to go and see someone that can decipher between one condition and another. Otherwise you end up on the 15 years of antidepressants.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And I think that is really important. Seeing someone who has knowledge of different things. The man with the hammer sees everything as a nail, right?
Yeah.
You need to see the right professional who has a wide range of knowledge. And ultimately, I think you just have to have an assessment. That's the only way you're going to really know. And I say that because the treatment in different ways can be extremely effective. That's actually for me a big thing. Because it's one thing to say, okay, I have this, but it's like, well, but things can be done to help you in lots of ways. And I think that's why it's important.
So reaching out to a psychiatrist rather than just a general
I think that
GP.
makes a big difference. Yeah.
Okay.
And also with the GP, and bless them, they only have 10 minutes to talk to you. They don't have the time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Brilliant. Thanks for your time, Claire.
Thank you for having me.